Assalamu alaikum. I hope everyone is well, inshallah. Brother Umar, I've seen your question. So inshallah, if you're still there, bro, just to give you an answer, because I think you messaged this or you put this on another video as well. So sorry I couldn't message you back there. But your question's in regards to Buddhism and the Buddhist philosophy and how it's been used today and how many people, which you're right in saying, there are loads of people today, even atheists today, who are adopting Buddhism or Buddhist practices and the Buddhist philosophy. Sam Harris is a perfect example of this, actually. Walaikum salam, Faizan. Hope you guys are well, inshallah. So it's very popular today, and there's reasons. I believe there's reasons why Buddhism is becoming, or aspects of the Buddhist philosophy are becoming very popular amongst many people today, especially the sort of new atheists. But before we get into that, let me just start off by saying I don't know. I haven't looked into Buddhism to any great extent, so I can't go into too much detail in regards to the philosophy. But generally speaking, the sort of some of the key aspects of Buddhism are this idea of freedom, to achieve freedom for the human being, and it's to attain peace through freeing oneself from your base desires, from negative feelings and thoughts, hatred, etc. And it's that struggle to attain that state, which in and of itself isn't necessarily all incorrect, because some aspects relate to what we believe as Muslims as well. But I think there is an emphasis of killing all of your desires completely, which could be problematic. But the general idea is that you free yourself from these base desires, these negative thoughts and feelings, and all of these things and as a result you attain peace and tranquility. Now, along with this, I believe, as far as I understand it, there is no concept of the divine in Buddhism or God. It's about the individual, more so. And I think that's one of the reasons it's extremely appealing to new atheists. Many atheists these days, because they don't want to believe in God. They don't, it suits them because they don't have to acknowledge a God, a creator, but at the same time they can have spirituality. They could practice some form of spirituality, which is lacking and missing in new atheism. So you can see why people like Sam Harris would jump onto this type of this trend, or try to create this trend. But yeah, so as far as the parallels, this idea of, in Islam, we're told that it's not about killing the desires; it's about focusing them, controlling them, and fulfilling them within the framework, which is outlined for us. So yeah, I think that's why it's very popular, amongst the atheists, because they're lacking spirituality. They need spirituality. And Buddhism is that quick fix without having to acknowledge a God or a creator. So that's why they sort of lean towards it. Welcome salam to everyone that's joined. So we're just addressing a question on Buddhism for anyone that's joined late. So hopefully that answers your question, bro. Omar, that's all I would go into now. I wouldn't. I personally don't feel comfortable going into more specific teaching because I haven't looked into it in any great detail. So as I always say, stay within your lane. I'm going to stay within my lane. I'm just going to share with you guys what I know. And I think from a Dawah perspective, what I've mentioned is sufficient, to understand what's going on here and why it's so popular among some atheists. If you would like to look into it more, you could definitely, I'm sure there's definitely resources out there where you can look into it more, inshallah. Okay, let's see. So yeah, brothers and sisters, all of you guys that have joined, it's a Q&A. So any questions you guys have, inshallah, you're more than welcome to ask. And if I know the answer, I will try to address those questions, inshallah. Okay, so Harun asks, how did I start giving dawah? For me personally, it was something that just happened after I, for myself, realized that Islam was the truth. So in my early 20s, I think I was 22, 23, when I came back to Islam. As soon as I understood the truth of Islam, for me, naturally, it was just, okay, this is the truth. Well, then it's not only for me, other people need to know the truth as well. So that's how it happened for me. I just had this natural desire to want to share this with others too. And then I found out, okay, there's da'wah, there's something that Muslims are encouraged to do. And then I started, I joined a local team in a place called Ealing in London, West Ealing. And then after that, I did a Dawah training course with IRA, the GoRap Dawah training course. And then after that, alhamdulillah, one thing led to another, and that's how I got involved. So that was my sort of personal journey to the Dawah in a nutshell. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this is a good question. Faizan says, how to respond to those who say there are scientific errors in the Quran? So look, what we need to do, guys, is first thing we need to realize and understand that the Quran is not a book of science. The objective of the Quran is not to teach us about science. The Quran is guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a book of guidance, and it has an objective. And the objective is to guide us, provide us with guidance so we're successful in this life and the next life. That being said, Allah does mention natural phenomena in the Quran. Allah does, when He's giving us signs or giving us arguments for certain things, Allah would point to His signs, His ayat in the heavens and the earth, the sun and the moon, and different things within nature. God does make mention of these things. But the primary objective is not so that we take those ayat and try to do some sort of linkage with the current science of our time. You can do that. I mean, you can try to see these parallels. And for a Muslim, it's something really interesting, because many times, if not most times, you will see that, whatever established modern science is telling us, and I say that with the context of understanding the limits of science, you would see that there's parallels between what we're learning when we start through studying the physical world through science and what the Quran mentions. Now you can connect the dots like that, but we shouldn't claim it as a miracle. So this is very problematic when we claim it as a miracle. Oh, look, who's joined us in the background? Subhanallah, bro. So if you were to walk in on someone like this, they'll get scared. They'll literally get scared, bro. You look very scary sometimes. We're alive. We're alive, bro. Do you want to join us for a little while? It's on YouTube. It's no one specific. It's the brothers and sisters online. I think he's gonna pray, and then maybe he will join us. But anyway, so you're not gonna find food here. So yeah, look, guys. Sorry. He's just thrown me off. So yeah, look, this is why we shouldn't claim scientific miracles in the Quran, because science has its limitations. Science doesn't deal with absolutes. And at the same time, the ayat in the Quran that normally we try to link with what science is telling us are those ayats specifically can in many cases have many interpretations, or more than one interpretation. So it's for you to claim a scientific miracle, for you to claim that there's a miracle here, there's two things you need to do. You need to say that this theory of science, whatever it is an absolute fact, which it isn't. And at the same time, you have to say that the verse that you're comparing that theory to, you have to say that this particular verse, although it has a scope of different interpretations, this particular interpretation is the correct one. And you can't do that. When you look at the principles of exegesis, you cannot, especially the ayat that have more than one interpretation, you cannot say that this one of these 5 possible interpretations is the correct one and the other are wrong. You can't say that. It's possible it's the correct one, it may not be. So you have to make these 2 claims to make that claim of a miracle. And you can't do either. You can't say that a particular theory of science is an absolute fact, and at the same time, you can't say in most cases that the particular ayah you're referring to, that interpretation you're picking is the correct interpretation. So if you can't do either, then you can't claim a scientific miracle. So we shouldn't set up this scenario where then someone turns around and says, oh look, scientific inaccuracies in the Quran. If we don't say, look, scientific miracles in the Quran, then people won't turn around and say scientific inaccuracies in the Quran. So let's really be balanced with this whole thing, brothers and sisters, inshallah. I know the scientific miracles narrative was very popular in the 90s especially. But I mean, if we're really honest and we look at the philosophy of science, we study it and we understand the limits of science, and at the same time, you, even on a sort of basic level, understand some of the principles of exegesis of the Quran, you would realize that we cannot claim scientific miracles. We can't do that in the Dawah. It's not true. Yeah, that's not saying we can't say there's some interesting parallels in the Quran. That there are some things that are quite shocking, that absolutely, that whatever modern science tells us, when we look in the Quran and we study it, time and again we come across passages which seem to be in line with what science is telling us about the physical world. Yeah, these things are true, but to take this and to put it on the level of and say scientific miracle, that's problematic. That's what we shouldn't do. And if we stop doing that, then we won't have this issue of, oh look, atheists turning around and saying, oh, there's scientific inaccuracies in the Quran. The Quran is not supposed to be, a scientific textbook. It's there to guide us. It's guidance for humanity. It mentions things in nature. Allah refers to things in nature briefly, and when I say briefly, I mean not in the type of detail you find in a scientific textbook. It's mentioned from a certain perspective. And it's done for a specific reason, and in some cases to sort of awaken our hearts, to make us realize, subhanAllah, there's all this creation around us. Who's created all of this? Who is that the power behind all of this? It's Allah, to get us to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not so that we study it, as a scientific textbook and so on and so forth. That's not the objective. Okay, let's move on, inshallah. My question is, can we... Yeah, there's some questions about Islamic State. It's not my remit, Bagel, to go into. So I'm not going to address that particular question, inshallah. I wouldn't know. So that will be the answer to your question. Bagel party, brother or sister. Many people say Buddha is a prophet. We don't know. Allah knows best. Maybe he was, maybe some can present a case that he was, but look, as far as the teachings we have from Buddha, we don't know what's preserved, what's not. We don't know what's been changed throughout history, what's not. We don't know if what's ascribed to him today was what he actually said. So we would never know, Maybe he believed in God. Maybe that information has disappeared. It's been wiped out. So yeah, we don't know. But if he was someone that didn't believe in the divine, well, then you can't claim him a prophet because he didn't believe in God. So it's we don't know if we're really so honest about this. Hamza says how to have correct tawakkul. So look, I'm only talking from the perspective of, it's a work in progress for all of us. Some people are doing much better than others. To have trust in Allah, what's the correct look? If I was to give you a sort of textbook answer to this, it's doing whatever you can, utilizing the means that Allah has placed in your world for you. Do the best you can and put your trust in Allah. So tie your camel, as they say, and then rely upon Allah for the outcome. Right? So that's how we are to understand it. Tawakkul isn't where you sit there and do nothing and expect everything to happen for you. Remember, we're functioning within this material space, this world, and this world has an objective. Allah has outlined this for us. Our life has an objective. So it's not gonna, within that framework, This is how tawakkul works. It's not a case of you just sit there, do nothing, and then expect Allah to do everything for you and for your situation to change. You have to make the effort. You have to do whatever you can in your power if it's a situation, to change that situation, and at the same time relying upon Allah. So put your trust in Allah, rely upon Him, and that means recognize and realize that there is no power except the power of Allah. Nothing happens except with the leave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah wills something, then it happens. If He doesn't, it doesn't. Nothing has any intrinsic power. Realize this, understand this, and then realizing this, trusting in Allah, putting it, meaning relying upon Allah. That also includes thinking good of Allah, expecting good from Allah. Doing all of this, then you go and do whatever you can. You use the means at your disposal. You do whatever you can, and then leave the rest to Allah. That's how we are to understand tawakkul. Now that's the the theoretical side of things. Islam really is about more than this, brothers and sisters. It's not just about understanding the theory. It's about now applying it, living by it. That is the difficult thing. That is the challenge, brothers and sisters. Wallahi, that is the most difficult thing to deal with. And don't fall into the trap, of thinking it's all about theory and knowledge. If knowledge is not applied, it's just baggage. That's what it is. So we have to apply this, and application is far more difficult. So putting your trust in Allah, really putting your trust in Allah, that's far more difficult than understanding tawakkul. But that's what it is in a if we're to understand tawakkul. How can an all-knowing God have a will? Why could an all-knowing God not have a will? I mean, I don't understand the question, Muhammad. So maybe you want to give me a bit more information, inshallah, or clarify a bit more. Like he knows this. Okay, let's see. Oh man, I've skipped it again. I have this. For some reason, my questions always jump around. So let's go back up, see if I can find where we were. So Muhammad Latif. Okay. So Akhi, what can we give dawah? Sometimes we are unable to answer. What should we do? Okay, so Harun asks, Akhi, when we give dawah, sometimes we are unable to answer. What should we do? So look, guys, there's a principle that you should keep in mind. If you don't know something, just say you don't know, right? If you don't know something, just say you don't know. Just make a habit of this. Honestly, we live in a world, guys, where everyone thinks they know everything. I mean, everyone knows. Everyone wants to just speak and share everything. It's crazy. It's madness. If you don't know, say you don't know. Especially in the dawah. Because think about, let me paint this scenario for you for a second. Yeah. Already there is a lot of misconception in regards to Muslims in the minds of most non-Muslims. Now, if ever you are in a situation where a non-Muslim asks you a question and you don't know the answer, but you try your best to give him an answer. So you may have heard something maybe 6 months ago, or looked into this and researched this 2 years ago maybe, and you really try hard to give this person an answer, and you give them an answer. What's going to happen when you give an answer you're not sure about? What's going to happen is it's going to come across in your body language. You're going to be nervous. You're going to be stuttering. You're going to be contradicting yourself. And the person you're speaking to, they're going to realize you're making things up. They're going to know this straight away. They're going to know this. They're going to know this guy is making things up. This sister is making things up. You don't want to be in this situation, because all that's going to do is going to add to their ideas about Muslim. Muslims. Whatever ideas they have in their minds in regards to Muslims, it's going to add to that, the negative ideas. Oh, look, Muslims lie too. They make up things too. We don't want to end up in this situation. Look, if you don't know, say you don't know. And there's nothing wrong in this. This is the way of our pious predecessors. If they didn't know something, heck, if they weren't acting upon something, they won't advise someone else to do that. So if you don't know something, just say you don't know. But at the same time, try to get them the information. So tell them, look, I'll get you in touch with someone that knows, or give me your number and I'll find out and tell you. It's fine. This is fine. If anything, this will have a positive impact, because what's going to happen is this non-Muslim is going to ask you a question. And if you don't know and you humbly say, I don't know the answer, sorry, but I'll find out for you, that's going to rub off in a positive way. That person's going to think, well, look, these guys don't make things up. They're very humble. If they don't know something, they just say they don't know. That's the best thing you can do. Have that as a policy in your dawah. If you don't know something, just say you don't know. Keep it basic. And this is why we always encourage, if you go to training.ira.org and do the dawah training course there, it's a free dawah training course, you will learn how to engage in a dawah conversation, even if you don't, know answers to many of the common questions that non-Muslims ask these days, because the dawah isn't about having the answers to everything or being able to articulate every question that every non-Muslim has about Islam. That's not the dawah. The dawah is essentially about communicating the truth of Allah to his creation. The fundamental truth, which is that you have a creator, there is one God, he created you and he created you to know him and to worship him. This is the essence of the dawah. This is what people need to know. It's not that they understand, why women wear hijab, or why men grow their beards, or why Muslims fast for a month and not 2 months. These are trivial things for these people, for a non-Muslim. These are important things for someone that accepts Islam and becomes Muslim, right? Those are the practices of Islam. But for a non-Muslim, those things are trivial. And in most cases, we get caught up in these discussions on these trivial things and we end up going nowhere. That's problematic, brothers and sisters, because we should ask ourselves the question, how effective is my da'wah to an individual if I've just spent 1 hour talking about the fiqh of fasting with this person, and he's a non-Muslim and he doesn't know about Allah, he doesn't know about the Prophet ﷺ, he doesn't know about the Quran, he doesn't know about the purpose of life. How effective was my da'wah to this person? We have to be honest with ourselves. So this is why the dawah training course on training.ira.org is very powerful. And for me personally, one of the best parts of the course is just the way it allows us to understand that we need to focus. The dawah is about focusing on the core message. Get that core message across to people. Who is Allah? Why were you created? What is the purpose of life? What is the Quran? Who is the Prophet, peace be upon him? Focus on these things in the dawah. You don't need to know the answers. As you learn and as you grow in the dawah, as the years go by, you will accumulate knowledge, you'll learn, and then you'll be able to answer some of these questions, inshallah, in more detail. But even then, if you have all of the answers, you need to ask yourself the question, if I'm giving da'wah, if my objective is to give da'wah to a person, say person X, and even if I understand the fiqh of fasting, and they ask me about the fiqh of fasting, from a da'wah perspective, if I was to spend the next 40 minutes teaching them about the fiqh of fasting, is that the most effective da'wah? Is that the most effective way of giving them da'wah? We have to ask, and the answer is no. If they leave understanding the rules of fasting and they get hit by a bus and die without knowing who their creator is, why they were created, so on and so forth, then how have we helped these people? Right? So this is something we need to really think about, brothers and sisters, inshallah. So anyway, just to summarize, if you don't know, just say you don't know. Keep it simple. Inshallah. Christian. So look, when it comes to Christians, Brother Muhammad asked about born again Christians. I think there's a general point that we should make here, inshallah. When it comes to giving da'wah to Christians, again, you don't need to. My view is you don't need to understand the Bible inside out to give da'wah to Christians. You don't need to understand, where the problems in the Bible are and where the contradictions are and so on and so forth. Whether you're giving da'wah to Christians, to Jews, to Hindus, focus on Tawheed, get across the message of Tawheed, Don't go in straight away attacking what they have, because all that's going to do, brothers and sisters, is going to make them different. Think about it psychologically for a second. Yeah, look at the these people, Christians. Say you're speaking to a Christian. This Christian person, say they're 40 years old or 30 years old. This person probably has spent their entire lives believing in Christianity, going to church, although most Christians don't these days, but going to church maybe every Sunday, believing in the Trinity. They probably have in their minds and their hearts, have a connection with Jesus, pray to Jesus, all of these types of things. It's emotion. There's an emotional investment there over the period of 20 or 30 years. Okay. That's there for this person. Now, if you go in a Dawah conversation, really think about this for a second, yeah? Because I'm really passionate about this, because I think this is, in most cases, extremely disastrous. If you go in now to this Dawah conversation with this person that I've just outlined, and you go and you straight away start attacking his beliefs, start showing the contradictions within the Trinity, start showing the contradictions within the Bible, what's going to happen? Is that person going to be wanting to listen to you? Are they going to be open to you? No, of course not. You've just offended them. You have attacked something they hold to be sacred. They're not going to listen to you. They're probably just going to get really upset and become argumentative or walk away and have a really negative opinion of Muslims. Look, I'm not saying there's not a time and a place for those type of discussions where you really highlight the contradictions of the Bible and you break this down for the Christian. You highlight why the Trinity doesn't make sense and the contradictions of the Trinity, and you highlight to them all of these things. There's a time and place for it. But I've seen this. You people go straight into this type of approach, and you completely shut down. The person is shut down. From a Dawah perspective, their hearts are closed. They're offended. They're upset. They don't want to talk to you. They probably want to just argue with you and get away from you. It becomes about the ego. So it's not, but what we need to do is try to win their hearts and minds. So how would we do this? Understanding. And again, emotional intelligence is lacking in a lot of cases. Be emotionally intelligent. This person has an investment for the past 30, 40 years with falsehood, but they have an investment with it nevertheless. They have an emotional investment in this belief. Okay, so how do I now try to give them the truth? First thing we should do is maybe just tell them about Tawheed, what we believe in. Show them how simple Tawheed is, how beautiful and coherent Tawheed is. Highlight this to them, and see how they feel about that. I think it was Sheikh Kamal al-Makki. In his course many years ago, he said something very powerful. He said, look, you have the diamond, okay? They just have sand. Now they're holding on to the sand. Now, if you start attacking the sand, what are they going to do? They're just going to clench their fist harder to hold on even more. But if you, if you just give them the diamond, show them the beauty of the diamond, they may just let go of the sand themselves behind their backs. That will be, and that's what happens in most cases. We need to try win their hearts and minds. Sure, sometimes you may come across a Christian, they just you're trying to give them Tawheed, they just want to argue, they want to debate, they're not listening. And sometimes people are very arrogant, and you need to break the arrogance. And sometimes the way to break someone's arrogance is to really put them in their place. But it's a case to case. Don't use that as a standard approach in your dawah. Just assume the best of people. Because human beings, we have a nature, and all humans don't like to be offended. All humans don't like things they hold to be dear to them be attacked. They don't like these things being attacked. Anything, whether it's someone's parents, their beliefs. If someone's beliefs, their family, someone they love and respect is attacked, people get defensive. They get upset. Try not to do this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran as well, where in the ayah where Allah says, "O people of the book, let's come to a common term between us and you." Allah highlight, and what are the common terms that Allah is mentioning? Allah tells us, that we I don't remember exactly the order, that we worship, that we don't associate partners with God, that we don't take each other as lords, and we don't worship anyone besides Allah. Where is the attack on the Trinity there? There's an indirect dismantling of the Trinity. It's very powerful. There's an indirect dismantling of the Trinity in these ayat, but there's no direct attack on the Trinity in this passage here. Of course, Allah mentions do not say three in other parts of the Quran. But again, what community was being addressed in these different ayat? What was the context of those ayat? This is a big difference. Look at the interaction of the Prophet ﷺ with the Christians of Najran. This interaction most likely happened in the last 2 years of the Prophet ﷺ's life. This was a time when the Muslims had power. The Prophet, peace be upon him, and the Muslims had no obligation to act kindly towards Christians at this point. They had the upper hand. The Christians, after receiving a letter from the Prophet ﷺ about accepting Islam, made the journey from Najran to Medina to come and meet the Prophet ﷺ. The Muslims had the upper hand, but look at how did the Prophet ﷺ treat them? How did the Prophet ﷺ treat them? Gave them space to pray in the mosque, in the masjid. Accommodated them in the mosque. They had the discussions. They obviously had food. They were taken care of. Sure, they had the discussion at points, got tense, got quite theologically intense, deep, but there was a level of respect, and there was a level of courtesy that was held throughout that discussion. And even at the end, look at the way that incident ended, brothers and sisters. Really think about this for a second. The Christians are asking the Prophet ﷺ about Isa alayhi salam. The Prophet ﷺ doesn't know, so ayat come down to the Prophet, peace be upon him. I think Ali Imran, Surah Ali Imran, these ayat come down about the likeness of Jesus being like the likeness of Adam. After these ayat come down, the Christians, the delegation, reject what the Prophet ﷺ has to say, what the Quran has to say in regards to Isa alayhi salam. They reject this. Then the Prophet ﷺ calls them to the mubahala, to invoking the curse of Allah. Let's make it be known who's telling the truth, because they weren't willing to listen. They weren't willing to accept what was being said. So okay, let's conclude it this way. Whoever's telling the truth, they will be known. Let's invoke the curse of God and see what happens. They come to the ground the following day. And the Christians, if you look at the narrations on this, the Christians, they discuss amongst each other, some of the leaders of the delegation, and they look at the Prophet ﷺ and his willingness and his readiness to engage in this invoking of the curse. They're like, no, we're not going to do this, because this is going to be trouble for us, right? So what do they do after that? After all of this, they're rejecting the message of the Quran, they're rejecting to partake in the mubahala. They then, even after this, ask the Prophet ﷺ for a treaty, which was then called the Treaty of Najran, and the Prophet agreed. So look at the way the Prophet ﷺ interacted with these Christians. And if you look at the covenants, the letters and the covenants of the Prophet ﷺ with the Christian world, there's a brilliant book. It's called The Covenants of the Prophet with the Christian World. That's the title of the book. It's by John Morrow. I think it's John Morrow. I think we have it in the library. It's a brilliant book. And I think he shares over 6 covenants that the Prophet ﷺ wrote with the Christians. And read those, and see how the Prophet ﷺ dealt with Christians. But we think, okay, attack. Anyway, I went off on a bit of a tangent, but let's continue, inshallah. So the point being, to summarize, be gentle, give them what you have, the truth first, and then go from there and see how it goes, inshallah. Alaikum Assalam. So Brother Muhammad Anas asks, how do you know Islam is the true religion? What are some rational proofs that got you convert to Islam? Okay, so for me personally, one of the greatest proofs of Islam is the coherence of its message, the coherence of the Quran, the coherence of the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. Because you have to remember, the Quran came down over a period of 23 years. 23 years is a lifetime for many of us. Some of us on this live may not even be 23. 23 years is a very long time. Now, in a time where there's no computers, paper, parchment is hard to come by, editing, there are no editing tools and so on and so forth. The Arabs are not really known for being, they're known for being an oral tradition. They're not known for being a tradition that writes. They don't have many scribes, many learned people. Considering all of this and considering the messages come down over 23 years, how do you explain the coherence of this message? If it was from anyone other than Allah, you would see many contradictions. As Allah says in the Quran, you would see many contradictions in the Quran. But when you read the Quran, you study it, conceptually, it is pristine. There is no contradiction as far as concepts are concerned. Take, for example, the view in regards to Allah, who is God, the nature of God. Read throughout the Quran. There is no shift like, oh, God is one, God is two, God is three, God is 10. No, it's consistent. Tawheed is consistent throughout the Quran. There's no change. 23 years. So you would see more details coming over time, but no contradictions. And that for me is one of the greatest proofs of the Islam being true, is the coherence of the message of Islam, the Quran, or considering the backdrop and considering the way it was revealed. And there's many other things. There's the historical accuracies of the Quran. There's the linguistic miracle of the Quran, the literary miracle. If you're interested, Brother Muhammad, there's a brilliant book. It's called The Eternal Challenge. You can get it on the IRO website. It covers all of the miracles of the Quran. So you can definitely check that out, inshallah. Okay, let's see how to answer those things. So Sori says how to answer to those who think Sunnah scholars oppose the intellect because they don't like philosophy. This is a very detailed question. Very dense, loaded question. There's a lot to be said here in regards to philosophy and Islam and so on and so forth. Look, if I was to summarize it, we need to a few things we need to understand. Very early on in Islam, very early on, maybe from the 9th, 10th centuries, definitely by the 10th century, even in the 9th century, philosophy, Greek philosophy, logic had made it into our tradition, meaning scholars at the time, many of them were studying it, many of them were even taking principles of logic and so on. Now, logic, obviously, we shouldn't compare logic with Western philosophy or philosophy as we understand it today. But logic was a part of our tradition. And look, for me personally, one of the most interesting things, and Imam al-Ghazali has a very interesting book on this. It's called The Just Balance. Brilliant book. He outlines 5 principles, 5 syllogisms, or 5 measures in his book, highlighting, and what he highlights is profound. He's like, put aside what people are saying. There's logic within the Quran. There are syllogisms within the Quran. There are arguments, logical forms within the Quran itself. There's another brilliant book. It's a recent book. I think we've got it here, but it's on the logic of the Quran. I'll probably try to find it for you guys later. It's on the logic of the Quran. And the author in this book, he refers back to Imam al-Ghazali's book, The Just Balance, but he instead of 5, he outlines, I think, 33 logical forms within the Quran itself. So these are syllogisms and other modes of logic that are found in the Quran itself that Allah uses to communicate or convince us of certain things in some places, provide an argument in certain places, and so on and so forth. A very common one that we always use, it's in Hamza's book as well, The Divine Reality, is chapter 52, verse 35 and 36. Where Allah says, were they created by nothing? Were they the creators of themselves, or did they create the heavens and the earth? This is a form. It's put in a logical form, process of elimination, where Allah is taking us through options, so we come to a certain conclusion. This is encouraging us to use logic. Now, there was a problem, however, historically, where you would see some of the Muslims that really took Greek philosophy as their foundation, and then they started to interpret Islam through that. That was problematic, and they went off track. They had issues. But then there was others who took some of the universal aspects. Because look, put it this way: the Greeks, although if you can say they categorized logic as one example, and aspects of philosophy, they weren't the first, they weren't the first people to reason. Right? People have been reasoning since the beginning. This is a faculty Allah's given us. People have been logical, although they haven't been able to put it into they may not have categorized it before the Greeks did, as they did, with its outlining its principles. People were using logic and reason throughout history. The Greeks may have been the first to just categorize it and so on and so forth. And then the Muslims came and then, took, those categorizations, etc. But the point is, Islam does not reject reason. Islam does not reject logic. These are inherent within our tradition, and this is why I always encourage, if you want to learn how to reason and think critically, read the Quran. When you start reading the Quran, it will just automatically develop your rational, your faculties of reason in a way that it's amazing. It has this effect on you. It develops the way you think, the way you reason, the way you ponder. It's from Allah. It's powerful, and Allah is the one that created our intellect. So it's, you would expect that His revelation would facilitate all of these things. But if you look at Western philosophy, and especially philosophy, as it's studied today, and what you study within, colleges and universities, that stuff's full of crazy madness. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend anyone to study, philosophy these days without having a good grounding in your own tradition, because it will mess you up. There are some loads of strange, weird ideas, because there's loads of issues. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but those people that completely reject reason and logic, they haven't understood that it's there in the Quran. Allah is reasoning with it. Allah is encouraging us to reason. He's presenting us with arguments. He's getting us to exercise the faculties He's given us. So it's all there. Anyway, let's move on. Chapter 3, which says, so this is an interesting question. You guys got some good questions today, mashallah. Should Muslims migrate to the West for jobs? Is it safe for them in terms of Iman and discrimination? Well, look, Muslims have been migrating to the West for the past several decades, at least, even more than that. For example, my parents were, first generation migrants. They migrated from Pakistan, or Africa. My father's family was from Africa, or they settled in Africa, and then they came to. So most Asian Muslims today in the West, their parents or their parents' migrated to the West. Now, generally, is it a problem? No. However, if you look at it from the perspective of your question, in terms of Iman, look, we need to. But then again, what the West has presented as far as today's philosophy or ideology, secularism, liberalism, atheism, it's rampant everywhere in the world. It's spread everywhere, even in the East. Go to places like Pakistan today, Bangladesh, so on and so forth, Egypt, and you will see the effects. It's everywhere. So, it's not only people in the West, people in the East, Muslims in the East today have a real challenge on their hands as far as preserving their Iman and their faith. And we need to, but it really depends on the person as well. Some people have this, a lot of young people have this, honestly. They have this idea in their heads that the West, it's like the American dream, isn't it? Or you can say the British dream. You go to the West, you're going to make loads of money, you're going to have an amazing life, this, that. It's not that case. I've seen many people come from the East with all these dreams and aspirations, and when they come to the West and they realize, okay, it's not easy, it's a struggle, and they struggle. So I don't know. I don't know. It really depends on what your situation is, where you are, and how you feel, where you are spiritually, where you are with your Islam. It's gonna be on a case-to-case basis. But the general problems that Muslims face today, the attacks that are taking place on their faith, on their Iman, it's happening all over the world. The stuff is spreading all over the world. So there's no way you can run to. It's just difficult times, really difficult times. The Prophet ﷺ, I'm paraphrasing, but it reminds me of a narration of the Prophet, peace be upon him, where he said that holding on to there'll come a time where holding on to your deen will be like holding on to hot coals. Look at the times we live in today. It's probably safe to argue, or maybe these are those times, and Allah knows best. But yeah, it's tough everywhere, brothers and sisters. Inshallah, today, may Allah make it easy. Anyway, how? So Umar says, who is the best speaker on YouTube who can describe the Quranic miracles according to you, bro? Okay, so the best Hamza George's stuff on the literary and linguistic miracle of the Quran is, for me personally, is brilliantly written. Read his essays on his website. He has, I think it's in the Divine Reality as well, his book. But there's an essay to start with. There's an essay on his website, and I think even if you go to the Sapiens Institute website, there should be maybe a webinar on this and a paper on this as well, on the linguistic and literary miracle of the Quran. I think it may be called God's Testimony. I think that's what he renamed it. So Hamza's stuff on it is brilliant. And also, generally, if you want to, for studying the Quran in the English language, I mean, Noman Ali Khan's stuff is phenomenal. It's probably the best in the English language. Bayana is brilliant. If you want more, deeper stuff, Sheikh Fahd Taslim stuff is phenomenal. Amazing stuff, mashallah. So yeah, those are a few places, I think, few things I would highlight. Abdullah says I should do collab with Youth Club. Yeah, bro, Youth Club Pakistan, may Allah bless them. Definitely, inshallah, whenever we get a chance. I love those brothers. I already consider myself as part of the team. Alhamdulillah. Because I when I went there last time about 3 years, over 3 years ago, the brothers are phenomenal. They're doing amazing work. I love them for the sake of Allah, man. Amazing brothers. Zia by, Raja Ziaul Haq, Dawah, Ali, Etisham, phenomenal brothers, mashallah. And all the team, all of the brothers there, just beautiful brothers, mashallah, and doing some amazing work in Pakistan. I always recommend brothers from Pakistan, if that are starting to practice, just check out Youth Club PK. You'll find them on YouTube and stuff, mashallah. They've got amazing stuff. I actually have a video with Raja Zia on this channel. We did a live together, so you guys can check that out, inshallah. Think about, what do you think about engineer Muhammad Ali Mirza? I don't know. I don't know much about him. I haven't seen much of his stuff, to be very honest. I've seen some of his, maybe 1 or 2 of his videos, and the ones I saw were really insightful. But other than that, I haven't seen much of his stuff, so I wouldn't be able to comment. Apni Dunya says, it asked me to do this in Urdu. I'll definitely start doing some lives in Urdu as well on the channel soon, inshallah. Okay, why do you believe that this? Okay, so Molly says, Assalamu alaikum, can you please give some career advice? Sorry guys if I'm working through these questions. I know I'm working through them a bit slowly. I'm trying to keep them as short as I can, but sometimes you have to give a bit more to sort of really clarify what you're getting at. So career advice. What I would say is that I think Muslims should definitely be involved in the sciences. Definitely be involved in the sciences. However, I would really encourage every Muslim that's studying science or involved in some sort of scientific subject to definitely study the philosophy of science. Definitely study the philosophy of science when you're doing your science. You won't learn the philosophy of science in most cases when you go and say do physics or chemistry or biology. But definitely study the philosophy of science. Do it on the side. It will really help you to understand and get a summary or overall view of what the scientific method is, how to use it, how to benefit from it properly, how to, its strengths, its weaknesses. And on top of all of this, it would also save you from falling into doubts and confusions in regards to certain things related to science. Because science is a method. Really understand the method. And when you study the philosophy of science, you'll be able to separate the method from the madness. And what I mean by the madness is basically the the sort of views some atheists have brought into the sphere of science, or atheist scientists hold, that really are just like in some cases more refined, in some cases are the same as the logical positivists of the early 1900s, 1920s. The views are the same. They hold the same views. Science is the only way to truth. Everything else doesn't make any sense. They push the idea of scientism. So what they've done is they've mixed their sort of views and ideas with the method of science. So, and where to the degree where it comes across to the average person as if science is, science denies God. Science is the only way to truth. And this confuses a lot of Muslims as well. But when you really study the philosophy of science and then do the science, and we need to do the science, look at our history from at least the 9th century onwards, all the way up to even the 16th century, just before the scientific revolution in the West. The Muslims, had it on lockdown. Seriously, they were on top of their science. They were translating the works of the Greeks. There's actually a brilliant book I'm reading right now. Really nice book the way it's written. It's called Light from the East. I really recommend you guys read this. Very interesting book. And there's many other books like this on the subject, but the author highlights that the Muslims not only translated the works of the Greeks, not only the Greeks, but even works of people, more ancient writers and civilizations. And they also, along with translating their works and preserving their works, they also did novel work themselves. They added to that, that knowledge. They came up with new things and so on and so forth, new discoveries and so on and so forth. But he also highlights that when the scientific revolution took place in the West, some of the leading scientists at the time, they didn't acknowledge, because they got their stuff from the Muslims, but they didn't acknowledge them. They just wiped them out of that chain, referring straight back to the Greeks. And the Greeks got their stuff from the Babylonians and the Mesopotamians. So it's very interesting the way there was almost a deliberate, I don't know why exactly, but there's probably many reasons for this, but there was a deliberate wiping of an aspect of history, that of the Muslims. Because if the Muslims didn't preserve the works of the Greeks and the earlier people, you wouldn't have had a scientific revolution in the West, because they wouldn't have the work to fall back on and to work off of, and it's hidden. But point being, knowledge is something integral to Muslims. We need to. This is, the science is a method that allows us to appreciate and observe the signs of Allah, to understand the world Allah has created, to get into its depths and appreciate His signs. And this will bring us closer to Allah. This is something, that we can make sense of as Muslims. Whereas atheism, what even foundational reason do you have to even have where does your motivation come from to do the science, to progress, all of this stuff, for what? And we've seen over even the recent history what happens when you have scientific and technological advancements on a philosophy that denies God and accountability, and therefore by extension morals, objective morals. We've seen the atrocities that have come about because of this, and so it's Muslims need to reclaim the scientific sphere and every sphere of knowledge, to be honest. So I think the next generation, I really encourage Muslims, man. Like, I didn't do it. One of the regrets I have is, if I knew this stuff 15 years ago, I probably would have studied science myself, done something in the scientific discipline, maybe history. But you guys, the next generation, this is what you guys need to do. You need to reclaim. You have to see as reclaiming your heritage, which is reclaiming the sciences, reclaiming, the different spheres of knowledge, and really developing. SubhanAllah, I guarantee you this, brothers and sisters, wallahi, this is not a joke. When you start studying the sciences, even on a sort of personal level, studying history, and you read the Quran, it opens up to you. Wallahi, it opens up to you like never before. because it's the Quran deliberately is brief. Now, this is not in a negative way. It's brief. It's concise. Concise is the right word. The Quran is concise. You know, it will mention things for a very specific reason, and it will mention them in a specific way for a specific reason. You know, but when you start then, when you have this background knowledge of history and science and maybe even mathematics and psychology especially, and then you start reading the Quran, it will open up to you like, I mean, it's just, it will blow your mind. It will continuously blow your mind. You know, subhanAllah, when Allah speaks about the previous nations and how they were wiped out wiped off the face of the earth because of their sins after the warnings came to them, and you read history and you see that historians, there are some you know, hard problems of history, if you like, you can call it that. Like, there's the hard problem of consciousness, the hard problems of history, where certain, you know, well-established civilizations suddenly just disappear overnight almost, you know, and they don't understand what happened. You know, now recently, I mean, what's really interesting, and it goes against the quote unquote established archaeology and history, but there is a lot of evidence which is coming forward now which completely blows the dating of established history and archaeology in regards to humans, the flourishing of human civilization, completely out of the water. You know, they have discovered you know, prehistoric sites. You know, such there's a site in Turkey. It's called I think it's called Göbekli Tepe, if I'm not mistaken. And this site, they've dated it to around 11,000 to 12,000, probably longer, 13,000, 14,000 years old. I mean, think about that for a second. And if you look at the structure of this temple that they've discovered, it'll blow your mind, because the way the you know, the structure is made and the pillars and the way it's constructed, it shows that these people had access to, they were very advanced. They had access to certain types of technology, not the way we understand technology today, but certain types of technology which led them to develop and make these massive structures, you know, which some of these stone pillars weigh over 50 tons, you know, in some cases. Like, how do you one carve these, transport these, and then erect these structures? You know, so, but the point being, there's a lot of you know, history which just civilizations, great civilizations, which you don't really hear about, but now they're coming to light, that had some, they were really advanced. And Allah mentions civilizations in the Quran that were far more advanced. They had far more than, you know, the Meccans, referring to the Meccans at the time. You know, they were far greater, and they were wiped off the face of this earth because they became arrogant. They turned away from Allah. Anyway, the point being, without digressing too much, that, you know, when you start to study knowledge generally in the world, and then you start reading the Quran, it will open up to you in some amazing ways. SubhanAllah. Anyway, let's move on. And this, how long are we? 57 minutes. Okay, we'll take a couple more questions, inshallah. So, Dawah to Islam in regards to philosophy and areas in philosophy to study. Yeah, look, what I would say is, you rather study logic if you want to study something. Philosophy, you can study, I mean, there's some good books, you know, you can get a good overall it's interesting to study the views of philosophers, how the thinking developed, but just don't fall into the trap of taking it as your foundation, because there are some conclusions that philosophy draws, and, you know, and there are things that will completely go against Islam and just don't make any sense. So don't have that as your foundation, because we've seen it throughout history. It's led people astray. So be very careful. Study, have a good grounding in Islam, and then if you do want to look into it, you can look into it. But I mean, it's nothing. It's not that special, to be very honest. It's interesting to study the history of philosophy if you want. You know, how the ideas developed through, and how different civilizations, you know, came up with similar ideas around the same time, and so on and so forth, and how there was an exchange of ideas and all of this type of stuff. But you're not going to find much of benefit there. Logic, yeah, you know, study logic, study all of these things if you want. They're probably better use of your time, to be honest. Did Buddha ever mention God? I don't know. Can you tell about future? So this question by Mullah Theist, tell about the future of Muslims in Islam. Is this Muslims going to suffer in the future? Look, all I would say in regards to this is we need to focus on ourselves to a great extent today. Like it's very difficult to just be Muslim today. Yeah, I mean there are a lot of, especially for the youth, there are a lot of challenges, there are a lot of trials, there are a lot of tribulations, things that keep you away from Islam. Just try to stay on top of your connection, your relationship with Allah. Something we all have to do. Try to fix yourself and stay on top of yourself. I mean, that is the most important thing. And when you start doing that, Allah will present you with opportunities to do more for others as well. Just try to stay on top of yourself and your connection with Allah, and fulfilling your objective as a Muslim. So as far as the future, I don't know. All we have to, look, we've got 50, 60 years on this earth, brothers and sisters, maybe 70, 80 if we're fortunate. But the last 10 of your years, for most people, are years where they can't do much anyway. So just do whatever you can to attain the pleasure of Allah. Do whatever you can to do something good. Have a vision, have a goal, and just try to leave something behind, which would be a means of good for others and a means of sadaqah jariyah for yourself when you're gone. And that's it. That's all I'd say in regards to this. What's your opinion on Tafhim al-Quran? I love Tafhim al-Quran. Sheikh Maulana Maududi's Tafsir. Yeah. Me personally, I think, look, when I say this, that's not to say I agree with, or that all of his opinions are correct. Humans can make mistakes, right? Now, with that caveat, I think Maulana Maududi's Tafsir is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal Tafsir from the perspective of history as well. He has really done a lot of research and gives you loads of insights. I mean, for example, when you read the Tafsir of Tafhim on Surah Al-Kahf, he really breaks it down. And as an example, the history in that Tafsir is phenomenal. I was looking into the sleepers of the cave, and he really goes into the history of this, when it happened. I think it was around 200 years before BC, 200 or 250 BC, during the reign of King Decius. I think it's Decius or Decius. Yeah, he goes into the whole history of it, how these people, they rejected the religion of the state. They were given a couple of days to make their mind up, and then the story as we know. But the point is, he really goes into the history, and it's really, it really sort of, it's a very enjoyable tafsir, and it's extremely fulfilling from the perspective that you'll learn a lot from it. It'll inspire you at times. It's phenomenal. He was a genius, in many regards. Someone that had deep insights. He has a few other books as well that are really, really interesting that you guys may find useful. There's one called I think it's to do with the 4 key words of the Quran. And he goes over the 4 key words of the Quran in a lot of detail, words which he says that you have to understand to be able to understand the message of the Quran. So that's a phenomenal book. There's another book he has, Understanding Islam, which is really, really good book as well. So yeah, I personally love his tafsir. It's one of the ones I refer to a lot, all the time. I personally, my go-to tafsirs are Ibn Kathir initially, then Tafhim al-Quran. Ma'rif al-Quran is another really good tafsir. Ma'rif al-Quran, you'll get a lot, especially for the English reading audience. You'll get a lot from the classical scholars as well. The Sheikh refers to Qurtubi and Tabari and so on classical sources, and then he sort of brings all of those views and then gives you a summary. It's a really good tafsir as well. Another one I really think is phenomenal, but again, you have to be careful, is Tadabburi Quran by Sheikh Amin Hassan Islahi. It's a really, really phenomenal tafsir from the perspective of the logha of the Quran, the language, the Arabic, especially the meanings of the words. It's really, really good. He really sort of elaborates on the meanings of the words, and then he'll give you the different meanings of the words, and then he will highlight the meaning of the word used in a specific ayah within that context. So which one is it out of them? So it's a really insightful tafsir as well to study if you're interested in knowing the meanings of the words. So yeah, those are the ones I sort of go back to, fall back on a lot. So in the discussion, brother Hamza Ali Abbasi, we're planning on doing more, inshallah, from next week, inshallah. So we're going to have, I actually discussed it with him earlier today. We're going to do something on the most common atheist questions, basically, and do a series on that, inshallah. This is a question for Sabur, but he's not here. What books would you recommend for beginners to understand better atheism, Darwinism, philosophy of science, etc.? So in regards to philosophy of science, there's a really good small book by Oxford or Cambridge Press, Oxford Press. It's one of those short summary, because Oxford Press has a series of short summaries on different topics. There's one on the philosophy of science. It's by Sumir Okasha, I think his name is. That will give you, it's a small little book, but it'll give you a lot on the on introduction. A really good book on the introduction of philosophy of science. Atheism, there is a brilliant book I read by Alistair McGrath. He's a Christian, but the book is really good. It's called The Twilight of Atheism. It's a really good book on the history of atheism, and it really puts things into perspective and highlights why atheism is so not that popular, but why it is popular to whatever degree it's popular today. Darwinism, I have no clue. The only book that I sort of semi-read, I didn't even read the whole thing, and then I lost it, was Darwin's Doubt by, what's his name? Stephen C. Myers. Yeah, that's his name. I'm looking at his other book called Signature in the Cell. So that's the only book I can recommend you. But there was another book that Sabur really recommended. It's called Darwinian Fairy Tales, I think, or something like that. I'm not sure. There's a book that he really recommends. So yeah, those are a few books, inshallah, that you guys can check out. This is a very good question, Muhammad Ali. In regards to people that say they believe in God, the oneness of God, higher power, but they don't believe in organized religion. A lot of people you come across will fall into this category, guys. Honestly, a lot of people. Because what you notice, we live in a society that promotes self-deification, promotes this type of God complex within people, which is that you are your own master. You do what you want to do. You choose your own destiny. This is the type of narrative that's pushed today. Liberalism pushes this, secularism obviously aids in this, and so on and so forth. Atheism, without saying. So you will notice that you may come across people that may acknowledge there's a higher power, that may acknowledge there's a creator, that may acknowledge that there's one God, that may acknowledge, all of these things, but they don't want to follow organized religion because they don't want to submit to anyone or anything other than themselves. This is the challenge, really, in the Dawah. I think one of the biggest challenges in the Dawah is to really get people around to understanding the need to follow your creator and the religion that he sent down to you, instead of living the way you want to live, following your own religion. How do you do this? There's a couple of things you can do. Again, if you go to training.ira.org and you go over that Dawah training course, it's covered in a lot of detail, but you need to first, before you go into proving the Quran, you need to highlight the need for revelation, guys. Yeah. Because when you highlight the need for revelation, hopefully this will get them to appreciate why we need to follow religion. And there's many ways you can do this. There's, you can use the manual analogy. Everything that we make has a manual. We as human beings also have a manual, which is the Quran, the final manual. Then you can also highlight just the human need for guidance. We haven't got it figured out. I mean, look at the world. Different countries have different rules and laws. Different states within different countries have different rules and laws, right? So I mean, people don't know. Human beings just don't know. We only have our subjective opinions, and that's why people differ all the time. No two people would agree on everything. So we there's a need for guidance, how to live. We may think we know, we may have our subjective opinions, but we don't really know. So the point being, highlight the need for revelation and then go into proving revelation, inshallah. So in regards to the causality argument, the dependency argument, and the issue, or not the issue, but the point about causality, how can there be dependency without causality? This is, look, there's many aspects to this. You give me a bit more clarity. I think it's Chihan lifestyle. If you can just give me a bit more context as to what you're asking specifically, because there's a few ways you can look at this, dependency and causality. What's the real issue? Just let me know that in the question section, then we can tackle it, inshallah. Samir Okasha, yeah, that's the book, Nasir. This is a very good point. Absolutely. It's for everyone to read. Is Jerry still working on his book, Ancient Monotheism? I believe so. Yes, he is. I haven't spoken to him in a while, but I believe so. He is, inshallah. My book, Brother Nasir, it's still in edit. So I will be able to hopefully give you guys more of an update next month, inshallah. This question, tell us something about Illuminati. I don't want to open this can of worms right now, guys. This is a topic in and of itself. Generally my take on it is that there are definitely groups out there, such as the Illuminati, Freemasons. They exist. They're very real. I have spoken to several Freemasons myself. Sometimes they've come to the table. I've spoken to, you won't believe, a Muslim Freemason once. So there are these groups out there. Now there's loads of theories in regards to these groups, especially with Freemasons. There's a lot of stuff out there. But look, in a nutshell, maybe we can do another live on this in a lot of detail. But there are definitely groups that exist that have had a hand in shaping the world that we live in today, that have had a hand in promoting godlessness, that have a hand in, or I believe will have a hand, or are having a hand in preparing for the advent of Dajjal. These are very real things, brothers and sisters, but with these topics, there is a lot out there, and it's very difficult to sort of separate the truth from falsehood. Some people will go to crazy extents and say crazy things in regards to these groups. We don't know. Look, there's a lot out there, but there's definitely a lot going on behind the scenes. But yeah, there's many books on this as well. There's many documentaries on this. Freemasons aren't a hidden group. Everyone knows about them. What is, still a question mark is what do they really get up to? There's a lodge in London. There's a Freemason lodge in London. I actually went there with Mohsin. We went on the tour that they take you around. And Mohsin from Dawah Digital, he actually, he really he's a bit of a nerd when it comes to these types of things, mashallah. He really looks into these things in a lot of detail. So there's a lot there. Maybe I could get him on and we can do a whole session on this stuff, inshallah. Illuminati, Freemasons, stuff like this, inshallah. But in a nutshell, from the beginning, there's always been a struggle between good and evil, truth and falsehood. So it's an ongoing struggle, and we live in times where it's very difficult to uphold the truth. So we have to be extra careful in the times that we live in. Okay, true. You know, just out of interest, something that I've just remembered, I was actually looking into this a little while back. What's really interesting, guys, is during the scientific revolution and the period of enlightenment, whenever you think about these periods, you think, oh, progress in material sciences, you know, turning away from myths and fairy tales of old, from turning away from religion, all of this type of stuff. But a lot of the Enlightenment philosophers, even the scientists of the scientific revolution, they actually dabbled in ancient magic. They actually really studied ancient texts from the ancients, the Egyptians and the Greeks, on magic that came from, obviously, from earlier, from the Babylonians, and they were really fascinated by this subject, and they actually continue to do a lot of research in this as well. Alchemists at the time were doing a lot of stuff at that time as well, and even today, if you look at these new age spiritual groups or religions, or certain books that are written, that talk about the law of attraction and all of this stuff. This is magic just repackaged. Literally magic. Alice, I think his name was Aleister Crowley, one of the big shaitans of the past century. He wrote, apparently he was inspired by some sort of shaitan or jinn to write his book. If you don't read his book, but one thing you realize is that he talks about a lot of this stuff, the law of attraction, and there's this idea within these books of glorifying the self, elevating oneself spiritually to the point where they become like a god, right? And the whole law of attraction thing is, you are in control. You can send out vibrations into the world around you through the power of the mind, and make things. These ideas come from ancient magic. It's just ancient magic repackaged. That's what people are turning to these days. So it's, that tradition never died. So they carried it through and now just repackaged it in a different way. And that's why Muslims especially need to be very careful when you read this stuff. A lot of this new age stuff, not only is it's shirk, but it's literally magic. It's ideas, incantations, practices that magicians of old used to engage in. So it's just repackaged for you, now. So it's really scary when you think about it. And it's, historically speaking, I think it was the Crusaders when they started to come back. I'm not sure after which crusades, but when they started to come back from the east and to the west, and they started to bring back some manuscripts from the eastern churches, because the west had completely sort of destroyed all of this type of stuff and really had a lockdown on the people and control over the people and stop people from doing this stuff. But they started to bring back certain manuscripts and translations from ancient Egypt and Greece, which they were translated, and they brought things back, and then finally some of these manuscripts and stuff. A lot of this stuff was been done undercover, especially in the Christian West in the 15th century, in the 14th century. They wouldn't, these magicians weren't doing things openly in public because they'll get persecuted by the church. But they preserved some of this tradition, and it's coming back now, man. It's really coming back, and people are really into this type of stuff. So may Allah protect us, man. Be very careful with this new age stuff. All right, guys. So we'll wrap up there, inshallah. May Allah bless you guys. What we'll do is we'll probably do another live Q&A, inshallah, some point later this week. And yeah, may Allah bless you guys. I'll speak to you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum.